Welcome to the Myofascial Magic in Action podcast. My name's Joanne Avison, and this is my friend and colleague, Paul Thornley. Hi,
Hi, John.
Paul.
How are you?
I'm okay.
Good.
I think I was cold and keeping the heat in as you are warm and keeping the cool in.
Right, yeah.
So today we're going to talk about weekend warriors and the importance of recovery, because we've had a few questions that have come in about injuries from training in marathons or playing football games or marathon biking and things like that at the weekends, and particularly as the weather changes, the season changes, whatever it's changing to in your part of the world. So I just want you to all imagine us. We're all joining in and we put our bodies to the test, see if we can survive a weekend of intense workouts without any recovery time. And let's see if we can avoid injury. I think we've all been there, right? Weekend warriors pushing ourselves to the limit and trying to cram as much physical activity as possible into the short breaks that we get at the weekends and even in the evenings after work. We get this a lot from our clients. So I don't know if you find this in your practice, Paul. I certainly do from my clients, is that they don't understand the importance of recovery time, which is what we're exploring today.
Well, exactly. And they rely on us to provide that recovery service for them because they've injured or annoyed their body in some fashion. And it requires a little bit of tender, loving care from the hands of one of the therapists that's available to them throughout the city. That's my job. It's also your job. And as much as we love looking after people's war wounds, for want of a better description, of in their endeavors to get fit and healthy, they're buggering themselves up every single day. And their accumulation of these strains and aches and pains ultimately lead them to our doorstep. And often they don't want the advice we give because they just want us to do the recovery for them and on their body's behalf, so that they can get back to doing the very same thing that created the reason to come to it in the first place.
Exactly. So like we're all out on these trails, we're pounding the pavements, we're hitting the gym. And I think it's actually really easy to get caught up in the adrenaline rush and the dopamine rush and forget that our bodies desperately need time to repair. And the consequences of not recharging that tissue, I mean, we've all seen it, right? It's a nasty fall, or it's a muscle strain, it's a ligament tear, or worse, it can be a broken bone. And the truth is that actually can put you out of commission for weeks or even months. And it involves the need for us. And I know you're a bit like me. We love promoting people to better performance. And of course, we very lovingly and caringly serve them when they've had these injuries. But I don't think people realize how key the ingredient of time is to their own ability to avoid the need for us. I know we're putting ourselves out of a job here, but you know what? It's worth it.
Well, isn't that the misconception about rehabilitation is like it's a fast and quick fix to something that,
But it isn't.
yeah, exactly. But to something that took time to create, and it's almost as if it's a 1-for-1. It's almost that if I do this quickly, this recovery, I will undo and unravel all of these sequences and all of the elements that created me to be in a particular uncomfortable situation, whether it's an injury or just an ache or a pain or a limitation or a complete cessation of activity because of the nature of it. And I often think when people hear us talking that they think we don't like exercise. We love movement. We're real advocates of all movement modalities. Please go enjoy yourselves. But
I was up moving on my mat at 5:30 this morning. It was literally out of bed, big yawn, and I'm on my yoga mat.
Well, and likewise, I was doing jujitsu at a similar time. Well, we're crazy, right? But the thing is, the difference is we've spent decades learning why people get injured, because we know people do. And they do it in such large numbers and in such frequency that there's a reason that it happens. So it's not that exercise is bad for you, but when you're exercising repetitively, you naturally damage your living tissue naturally through the very outcome of exercising.
Exactly. And I mean, from shin splints, pulled hamstrings, twisted ankles, broken bones, the list of potential injuries is actually, well, it's endless. And more often than not, it's not actually the exercise, right, that itself that's caused the problem, but our enthusiasm. This is the thing. We want everybody to be enthusiastic about moving, but it's the combination of their enthusiasm and excitement and the adrenaline and the lack of recovery time is really what's tantamount to the injury that they might not have had if they'd had enough. What it's like, it's the intensity over time. I think we overexert ourselves. And here's the key. I think we ignore the warning signs of fatigue and pain until it's too late. And it's the warning signs. This is, that a season can be ended for a game player, a footballer, a rugby player, any team player, netball, swim teams. I've seen it over and over again. Overtraining, lack of rest at every level, weekend warrior to elite athlete. And it could have been avoided with a little bit more rest and tender loving care.
But I think what gets lost in that understanding is the psychological benefit of movement and being part of a team or an activity. It overrides the body's natural signaling that you're doing it too far and too frequent without giving it time to recover physically. So it's that mental and psychological benefit, and it's such a feel-good factor to be joining in. And the thoughts of not taking part and not joining in and not continuing to turn up to take part within the team or individually to achieve a certain personal best or a continued enthusiastic participation, that we override and we ignore these clear signals that the body gives us, because they are crystal clear. There's no doubt about it when we hear one.
Absolutely, because when we talk about what's driving this trend, because it is a trend, of overexertion and neglect of recovery time, I think some ways it's a fear of losing fitness. As you say, it's a fear of losing out on the rest of the group. And it's also simply a lack of knowledge about the importance of rest and recovery. It's paramount in the soft tissue matrix. And I think while we've got this idea that the body moves based on its musculoskeletal system, and we do the maths, physics, and chemistry of muscles and bones, and we miss out the myofascia, the soft tissue matrix, and how it actually works, for whatever reason, the consequences are real. And we're missing out on the science behind the recovery. We know about collagen synthesis and collagen deficit.
But wanting to know about something and knowing about something are two different things.
Oh, big time.
So we know about things because it's our profession. This is our passion. Our passion is making sure that everybody that we're lucky enough to interact with and share our knowledge with benefits from it, so they can continue to have their longevity of their choice of how they live and move their body in whatever field, whatever realm, or whatever level of ability that happens to be, from the beginner, the sedentary, to the elite, to the Olympic, to just the journeyman. However, the majority of people don't want to know the workings or the intricate nature of their living tissue and how it is transforming during performing. Well, ugly. And our job is to make them as enthusiastic as us, so that they don't require rehabilitation. They just require guidance so that they keep their ability to perform whilst understanding the transformative nature of this living tissue and the nature of its ability to perform and the requirement to recover and resynthesize properly so it can perform as well and frequently. Unfortunately, people think it's too hard, and it's like, oh, do I have to know that? You know that, you do it for me. But we don't live with them. And this is the quandary, isn't it? People think that they're getting their long-term aspirations of health and fitness and performance through these infrequent bouts of exercise, whether it's just 1 hour a day, a couple of hours a day, a couple of hours throughout the week. But for the
weekend.
Or the weekend, or the vast majority of the time, they're in an office, in their home, or in a stationary position. And that shape that they exist therein for the vast majority of the time is the shape of their living tissue and how it naturally performs. And it doesn't always mirror the activity they want to perform in later.
Well, I think one of the big problems is we do exercise as an on-off switch. as you say, we sit at the desk where we're absolutely doing nothing, or we might even have our ankles wrapped around our other ankle, or we're curled up somewhat, we're folded, right? And then we do the weekend warrior. We go out in the morning, we go to a class, then we spend the afternoon, play a game with friends, like out in the field, football game or whatever it is, or go for a marathon bike ride. And then Sunday, oh, brilliant, I've got the day off. What activity can I do today? And it's another big activity. And then it's back to work. So the switch is on or off.
And it's also seasonal.
And it's also seasonal. But I think that what people don't understand is that when we exercise, our bodies undergo a series of extremely complex physiological changes in time, from micro tears in the muscles to depletion of energy stores, and our collagen, which is what we're basically made of, goes into something called collagen deficit. And it's only through rest, hydration, nutrition, and relaxation, having fun, banter, being with people, doing something mild but in motion, i.e. something that isn't as sedentary as lying on the sofa, but isn't also performing. And it takes that time to restore the body into collagen synthesis and keep it there ticking over before depleting it again. And this tick over is really one of the most essential features, I think, this restoring of the essence of our ability to move. And it actually makes our tissues stronger over time and more resilient in the process. But how many of us actually prioritize these essential components of recovery instead of just jumping from one workout to the next, or from sedentary to superhero weekend warrior?
Very few. And I think it's this understanding of its self-regulatory of characteristics is the body. And that self-regulation is happening over a spectrum every single moment of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year of our existence. And allowing it to regulate over time and for a specific purpose is important. And this is why we're trying to inform people. It's the requirements, the special ingredients that are necessary to have a successful recovery, to have a successful resynthesization of these collagen tissues that need to recover, reform, and reestablish integrity so they can perform again for you. And that can take sometimes, after high intensity, many, many hours, some between 30 and 56 hours, depending on how intense your sessions were. And if that time frame is true, which we know it to be through the research, that means you really should only be doing 2 high intensity sessions that have that cause and effect in a week. And some of these people are doing this over a weekend, or are doing it every single time they go to their facility of choice. So the body is constantly in deficit, which create these energy crises that they're always trying to manage with even more elaborate rehabilitative modalities like foam roller and ice baths and massages and rehabilitation. And we're only the stopgap that manages the disastrous nature of not allowing this tissue to restore and recover properly so it can perform again optimally.
Exactly. And that's the essence of MMIA, really, isn't it? For people and practitioners to teach people. And, I'm going to share a little story here, actually. Can you imagine me sharing a story? I'm going to share a little story that really hits home. I've got a friend, let's call him Thomas. He was a personal trainer, fantastic dance teacher, absolutely fantastic dance teacher, and someone who was always in action. He took 3 to 4 classes a week and did, 10 to 12 personal training sessions a week, and often went up to the city to teach choreography to the others in the dance modality that he performed in. And, constantly going. And he kept everyone motivated to move, but move intensely. And although it was dance movements, a little bit like, we're watching Strictly Come Dancing at this time of year in this country, and, that kind of intensity of training. But he doesn't control or work with people over all that time. He just pushed himself constantly to meet what was needed all the time, especially at weekends. He did marathon events at the weekends. And one time he was traveling back from America to the UK, and he'd been up all night on the flight, and he thought he could literally hit the ground running the morning he arrived because he could manage the jet lag. And he behaved as if it didn't really count and it could be ignored. So it wasn't even the kind of performance of that he'd been doing. Obviously, he'd been doing before, but this was about lack of
Yeah.
sleep and the body hitting that deficit moment. And he went over on his ankle and really severely tore a ligament doing something he was absolutely used to doing. And he couldn't walk, let alone dance, for weeks. So what was the cause? Overexertion, exhaustion, and no recovery time. Plain and simple. And it was no recovery time from lack of regular rest and sleep. It wasn't even a particularly heavy training session.
But here's the problem. All of us believe we're invincible. And we don't really appreciate how vulnerable our bodies are, because it is soft tissue and it can be damaged within a moment, within the blink of an eye. And we get very complacent and we just take it for granted. And what hurts me the most, when you see these talented guys like Thomas and any other people that are really dedicated their lives to learning something awesomely, making it generally look effortless, which means they put thousands of hours in to become so gracefully powerful at what they do.
Oh, he was brilliant.
But look at any sport athlete, anybody who does any sport repetitively, it breaks my heart when I see these people, and it's the very thing they are very passionate and capable and skilled at doing becomes the very thing that stops them doing the very thing they're passionate and skilled at doing. And it becomes a memory because they didn't make sure they were aware of the consequences of not recovering optimally, often, and more frequently enough, so that they could maintain the quality of their workouts and their shared performances. And we benefit from their performances. We benefit from their dedication, but they suffer as they're entertaining us when they don't make sure they recover so they can entertain us more.
I think there just isn't enough importance put on it. And I mean, Tom's story is a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that even the fittest among us, we're still made of soft tissue. We're made of myofascial integration or osteomyoneurofacial integration, the whole body. And it can fall victim to injury if we neglect recovery, because it loses. This is what he said to me at the time. What have I done? Why was I such an idiot? And I said, you weren't an idiot. Your tissue literally had lost its reaction time because it was tired. It was that simple. Now, normally his tissue would almost predict what was going to happen. You know how you must know this from jiu-jitsu. You're there and you predict what's coming next. You're ready before it actually happens.
You're trying to anticipate.
And it's that you're anticipating, exactly. And it's that anticipatory quality that the tissue has that actually I think goes when it's really, really tired. And he lost his natural spring back and that innate synthesis.
He lost the ability to react and manage the anticipatory effect of that unpredictable fall. And his tissue did not respond in a timely fashion to catch him on the fall or recover from it in a timely way. And this is the thing, we get very complacent with ourselves. We just assume we can do it all the time. And the truth of the matter is, the very people who don't want to know how to do something, they just want to do it, they fall victim to their own enthusiasm. Whereas if they could embrace that enthusiasm or wanted to become really good at a particular sport, rugby, football, running, swimming, cycling, whatever it happens to be, but recognize the consequences of that activity on their body and manage them better, then they would be less reliant on the rehabilitation world to patch them up, to put them back into that activity until they get injured again. And what they would then start to establish is a self-regulating, self-healing, fully recovered tissue that knows how to do it in motion, which is why it's so important to understand intensities and how they vary their skill set and their training. And there's a spectrum of it throughout all of the year, not just periodically, whether it's a weekend warrior or somebody's in an established training team. We can change those intensities so that it accommodates recovery, so performance is available, so recovery happens naturally, and you don't need to rely on these sympathetic approaches to soft tissue recovery, like your icing, your foam rolling, your massaging, all of these external approaches to having an internal effect. We allow the internal architecture to self-manage and self-organize and self-repair in a much timely, organized and successful way.
And wasn't that brilliant in one of our live coaching calls in MMIA when somebody said she tripped
Yeah.
going into a swimming pool, and she just righted herself and found herself sitting there and a bit out of breath and stunned, but looking around completely unhurt. Her body had righted itself before she had time to even realize she was falling. And it was one of those stories that, I mean, everybody was clapping because it was absolutely an expression of why we do these different kinds of micro movements in the particular sequences that we do. So there you have it, guys. Basically, the importance of recovery time for weekend warriors cannot be overstated. And I just urge you out there to think about prioritizing rest and hydration and the subtle self-care that isn't just this kind of brutal on and off switch, so that we can avoid the kind of injuries that can end up keeping us sidelined for weeks. And remember, it's not just about the workout. It's about the in-between time and the recovery that follows. And you have to give your body the right amount of time, because we're all busy thinking about how fast we can perform something, but we don't stop and think about how much time we need to accumulate the energy to perform. You know, we're very quick about measuring strides per mile and strokes per length in the pool, but do we give the same consideration to the time to recover? I think it just isn't treated as a priority enough.
I don't think there's any consideration given it to at all, because, like I say, we take it for granted and we just assume we'll be able to do whatever we want for as long as we want throughout our life. And unfortunately, and I wish it wasn't true, but you can't. If you take your body and you assume, and assumptions are the worst, aren't they? Because we get caught out by surprise. And it's that the straw that broke the camel's back. I didn't know what happened. My back just went. My neck just went. I just hurt my elbow. Or I just tripped on my ankle. But you set yourself up for this outcome. We're the architects of our own demise rather than the architects of our longevity of choices. And I think that's the key, right? We want to make sure that we can all enjoy moving forever. Because we say this a lot, don't we? We live 100 years, give or take a decade. But the vast majority of people, these weekend warriors and these sporting people, they tend to not do the same sport for such a long duration. It tends to be short-lived and sporadic, and then they quit a lot, often due to unsuccessful recovery protocols that lead them limited and restricted in their movement choices. And that's a shame, because it's unnecessary. It can be a totally different story. It just depends who's writing it. And we're all the authors of our own story. So if you want to know the ingredients and the characters within your story, make sure you include recovery and rest and hydration, because they're such pivotal characters in how you're going to live and move and how successful you'll be about the movement choices you make.
Well said. And thanks for tuning in, guys. If you've got a similar story to share about a time when you've neglected your recovery and paid the price, drop it in the comments below. You never know who you might make a difference to. And don't forget to click the subscribe button so you're first to hear about anything else that we've got to share with you. And also, we'll be sharing more tips and tricks for injury prevention in our next video. Take care and have a great week.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.